what a coward I would be if I stayed in this job. And then he's like, if you don't get out of here in the next 30 seconds, I'm gonna kick your ass. Well, I'm trying to educate all these people and you want to punch me? When I was speaking directly to camera, I was pretty bad. I was barely getting to like 50 views per video. In my first year, I made $840 from YouTube. My worry about being a YouTuber was like, this could disappear overnight. And I know how hard it is because I nearly quit. We hit 10 million subscribers and my wife said, this is unsustainable. You can't keep doing this.
Welcome to Fireside, where we sit down with successful founders every month in order to capture their stories, insights, and lessons learned along the way. Hit the follow button and subscribe to our newsletter for more, link in the description. Thank you for joining us, Derek.
Thanks for having me. It's fun to be here.
So you are the founder of Veritasium,
Yes.
one of the best and most influential science platforms online. On YouTube, you have 20 million subscribers and 3.8 billion views. But your journey dates back to way before YouTube when it comes to storytelling and science. You were born in Australia, and then you moved as a toddler to Canada. What was it like growing up in Canada?
I think growing up in Canada was like any other Canadian kid. I don't know if I thought I was special or something, because I wasn't really from there. My parents got me a bedspread cover, which was actually the Australian flag. So I don't know if that sort of deeply seated somewhere in my psyche that Australia would be in my future, but I was pretty culturally Canadian. I still sound, I would say, mostly Canadian. I still follow hockey, which I think is the key measure of is someone Canadian or not. But I do love Australia as a country. And so after university, I went back to Australia for 11 years. So yeah, I love Australia, but also I love being everywhere in the world. So.
And your parents are South African.
That's right. Yeah, my parents left South Africa in the 70s. They kind of settled in Canada, and then my dad got a job in Australia. So we were down there when I happened to pop out. So I feel like I just got that passport strictly out of luck. Yeah.
So what was it that your dad or mom were doing for work that may have influenced your early worldview or curiosities?
Yeah, I mean, my dad was a civil engineer, so he was into science, and he worked at a big pulp and paper mill, and a few of those around the world. So that took him traveling all over the place. But yeah, I don't know if that rubbed off on me, but I think I was just always kind of interested in science, and I was interested in doing well at school. I was a pretty competitive kid, and I wanted to be at the top of my class, get straight A's, that sort of thing. So it was always an early motivation.
You can't necessarily pinpoint it to your dad's engineering background.
I mean, probably genetically, I have some predisposition toward, the sciences in some way, I'm sure, towards math. My mom said that she loved taking physics in university, even though she couldn't really describe to me what physics was. But yeah, I guess both my parents were, into education, but they also, like, I was the third of three kids, and I think they also just kind of let me run a little bit. Like, as the third kid, you just get to do whatever you want, and I enjoyed that sort of freedom and flexibility. And I think a lot of my effort at school was just very self-directed. That I wanted to be a great academic student, and I felt like this is what you have to be good at to be good at life. So I worked hard at school, and I was good at it. So yeah, it was a good upbringing. I had lots of amazing teachers, so I really enjoyed the whole school experience.
What were you doing at home? Were you doing small experiments, or?
I don't think I was that weird, I think I was so entirely normal. The main thing I remember is sort of running around my neighborhood with my neighborhood friends, and this is what I want for my kids now. I want them to have local friends, and I want them to have independence and autonomy. It was the sort of thing where you would go out and be home before it gets dark, that sort of thing, and your parents wouldn't keep too close tabs on you, and you go to the park, you could run up the street, don't get killed, but besides that, you can play around and do whatever you want. So I'd say it was a very idyllic upbringing, and I enjoyed it a lot. West Vancouver, where I grew up, was a bit of a, it was a pretty peaceful, safe suburb. So, it was very, very easy, happy, upbringing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you are definitely a scientist, but you also have that filmmaking creative part, which I'm very curious about, by the way.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get to that.
Okay.
You later ended up studying engineering physics.
Yep.
You tried to pursue studies in filmmaking,
Yep.
which did not work. You'll tell us about that as well. And you ended up doing a PhD in physics education.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So
there's
tell us what happened there.
sort of a long winding road. I think that like I always liked being in front of the camera or being on stage. When I was about 12 years old, I did a musical production in downtown Vancouver. It was a Christmas Carol, so it's like the Scrooge story, and I played the role of Tiny Tim. I had a few solos in that, so I was singing and acting, and we had 60 performances in the lead up to Christmas. So you know, it was one of these formative experiences where I loved being on stage. I loved performing. I think I loved the creative act of working with other people to produce something, and produce something that other people enjoyed and got a lot out of. So that really, yeah, I loved it. I played in bands and orchestras. I played the French horn, and then through high school, I did a few more performances and played in the pit orchestra of some other musicals and stuff. So I was into this creative side, and I found it very enjoyable. But I thought, as a career path, you know, like I kind of wanted to be a film director or a writer or an actor or something in that direction. But I thought that that sort of career path was not a meritocracy. I thought it was sort of the kind of thing where you just have to be lucky. So, you know, I contemplated my options on graduating in the year 2000. You know, should I go to LA and try to run coffees for people and like work my way slowly up the ladder and, you know, maybe just look for that break or something? But it just didn't feel like being smart and hardworking would pay off necessarily in that career path. And so I was sort of terrified of it. And I was excellent at school. I was the top student of my graduating class of about 425 students. I had a full scholarship to go to a Canadian university and study engineering. And so I did that. It seemed like the safe choice. And, you know, I kind of told my dad when I was graduating, I was like, you know, maybe I want to take a year off and try something more creative. And he flipped out and was like, no, you're going to go and you're going to do it. But I think ultimately, like, I was probably just too chicken to do it at that time anyway. So, you know, it felt like the safe path, felt like the safe thing to do. Go and get a good, you know, backup degree or whatever. So I went to university and did that.
So that's the engineering physics.
Engineering physics, yeah, at Queen's University in Canada. And you know, it almost felt a bit like summer camp to me. It felt like I'm kind of like here going through the motions. I'm kind of stuck here for a little while. I'm not really doing what I want to be doing, but you know, it's mildly interesting. You know, like science is interesting, so I enjoy learning about it, but at the same time, it wasn't what I saw myself doing long term. So in that way, it felt like, yeah, building a backup plan.
So you tried to go to film school.
Yeah. So after finishing at Queens, I also had this sort of hypothesis, suspicion that Canada is not a place where humans are meant to live. Like it's really cold. It's just too far north. Like you couldn't live there without technology. So I wondered what would it be like if you didn't have to scrape the car off in the morning, or you didn't have to put on so many layers, take off so many layers, have boot rooms, you know, that sort of like mud rooms, these sorts of things. So, and I had this Australian passport. So I just up and moved to Sydney where, at the end of university, and I didn't really have any plan, but I had like a 1 year sort of return ticket to go and just explore and have an adventure and see what happened. But as soon as I got there, I kind of started figuring out like, well, I need to have a job or I need to have some way of supporting myself. And I don't know. I sort of floundered around for about a month, and then I started a PhD at the University of Sydney, which feels like a very sudden like jumping into a PhD. What the heck are you doing? But I kind of had this plan of like, okay, I'm going to take my interest in physics and science and my passion for being creative and making films and try to merge them together. So the PhD was in the School of Physics at the University of Sydney, but they had a physics education group, and so I kind of pitched someone there on this idea of like, I want to make a PhD about how do you make a film that teaches people physics effectively. So that's what the PhD project was on. So it was kind of, you know, it's very relevant now, but the year was 2004 and there was no YouTube. There was like no clear way that this was going to be effective. But it's just things I was interested in, like the attempt to like smush these passions together. And ultimately it didn't really satisfy either passion. because I wasn't really being a physicist and I wasn't making good videos. I was kind of making research instruments. Um, and so the PhD was, I guess, valuable in hindsight, but at the time, again, it felt like a bit more of like playing it safe, backup plan, you know.
So,
Yeah.
so were you actually rejected twice from film school?
Yeah, so I applied to film school after that. I also applied to the National Institute for Dramatic Arts, the theater school, the same place where Kate Blanchett, and Russell Crowe, and Mel Gibson, where they all went. I made it to callbacks, which I felt proud of my first time up, but I did not get accepted to the program. They accept about less than 1% of applicants, so it's a hard thing to get in there. And the film school, they rejected me twice. I was going in applying maybe for their documentary program, but they were looking at my record and they're saying, okay, here's someone who's got a bachelor's in engineering physics and a PhD in physics, and now they want to do film. Like, that seems weird to us. And I didn't really have enough sort of portfolio material to back it up. And so, yeah, I was rejected from multiple film schools and acting schools.
Just quickly, I'm curious, for someone who was always acing their
Yeah.
classes, how did that feel to be rejected twice?
It didn't feel great, I gotta tell you. I went to one audition for a theater or a musical theater program, and I had the people who were watching me kind of smile and sort of chuckle to themselves as they were watching me, and I thought, this is a terrible sign. Like, in their most empathetic and loving tone, they said to me, tell us about why you're here. Like, it was really like, we don't understand why this engineer PhD is in front of us. And I thought, okay, yeah, I'm really out of place. Like, this isn't the spot. This isn't going to be the path. So I guess it's good to get that sort of feedback. But in some ways, I understood the rejections from these places because it was like, these are very elite, high-level artistic institutions. And if you haven't spent your life building the portfolio for that sort of institution, I can see why you wouldn't be taken seriously.
Absolutely.
I think I also just had this assumption that, like, no one owes me anything. I didn't think anyone on YouTube owed me anything when I started on YouTube. I didn't think that these schools owed me anything when I went to audition. I was like, I'm shooting my shot, fully understanding that, like, it's a super long shot, but I'm gonna work and try to create something that'll let people know that maybe I should be here, maybe I should be in this space.
So in 2011, you did launch Veritasium on YouTube.
Yeah. So end of 2010, I worked at a tutoring company in Sydney, and this was almost my first taste of entrepreneurship. And I had this crazy realization. When I was a kid, my sister went to business school. And to me, and no offense to people in this room, because I'm sure some people in this room may have gone to business school. But to me, people who wanted to go to business school, I was like, how sad that must be for you. That the only thing you're interested in is money. That nothing interests you more, like, so this was my bad take, okay, on business. I since have seen the light. But so after my PhD, I ended up working at this tutoring company, and my role was kind of the head of science, and I got to be the right-hand man to the owner and founder of the business, and the business kind of could be run in silos because there was a whole science department, so it had the science teachers, science tutors, all the programming, the resources, the students under that, and then there was math and English, which were also run as their own kind of businesses. So I almost felt like I was an entrepreneur at that point. And I found that I loved it. It made me feel so much more practically useful in the world. And that was such a fantastic thing, having come from being in education for so long and from doing a PhD and feeling like all these things were not really making a difference. Being an entrepreneur was this, really amazing, exciting thing for me. And I realized that so much of being an entrepreneur is this problem-solving issue. And finesse, figuring out how to create just the right amount of supply to meet the right demand, trying to grow the business. So I got involved in doing like our Google ads in terms of implementing a database and an online portal for our students and for their parents, processing payments on a monthly basis rather than quarterly as they had been doing. So I was implementing all these changes and sort of getting a real taste of what it was like to run a business. And I loved it. I loved the job. I loved teaching. I loved the other teachers I was working with. The students were all average to above average, like they were nice kids. They just wanted to, perform at the highest level. So like everything about this job was good. So, and I was being paid well and I had autonomy and I liked the founder. Like there was no drawback to this business. And so there was this moment where the boss, the owner of the business, decided that he was going to hire a GM to allow him to step out a little more. And he hired someone from a bank, someone that he'd known before, one of the students who'd actually come through the tutoring company. And I went to him as soon as he made that decision, and I said, you know that this is ridiculous. Like, obviously it should be me. Obviously it should be me. Like, I am running the largest portion of this business, which at the time, revenue was 4 million just from the science department alone. We had 800 student enrollments in just science. We had just opened our second campus. We were looking to open, 4 or 5 and so on. And I was across all of it. All of our systems, even doing some online videos for this company, doing some marketing, doing the Google ads. Like, I was clearly the right person for that job. And that's what I said to him.
And yet.
And well, he said to me, like, yeah, maybe, like, stick around and maybe in 5 years, blah, blah, maybe this will be the position for you. And I thought, hang on. Do I want to be like the head honcho of a tutoring company in 5 years? And I realized that even that vision, that was not it. So that forced me to take a really stark look at my life and say, the thing I've always told myself I want to do is I want to be a filmmaker, I want to be a creator, I want to be a director, I want to act, do all these things. And this is not that. And so seeing that made me say, okay, I'm out. And within 6 months, I basically removed myself from the management and the full-time role at the tutoring company. And I moved myself into this role of teaching about 15 hours a week, which was like 9 hours on a Saturday and a couple evenings. So I was able to cut my working hours by 66%, but cut my pay by only about 30% because my teaching hours were paid at a much higher rate.
Engineer optimization.
Engineer optimization. And I thought, what a coward I would be. What a coward I would be if I stayed in this job when I have the perfect opportunity to work this like cushy, fun thing that I enjoy, just the teaching hours, and spend the rest of the time doing whatever I want. And that's where I came up with this name, Veritasium. To me, it wasn't really just the name of a YouTube channel. It was the name of a life philosophy. That in that moment, I was going to stop dating the girl who was fine, but like wasn't the ultimate girl. You know what I mean? And I was going to stop doing the job, which was wonderful, but wasn't the dream job. And I was going to do the thing that for me was like in my heart, what I need to be doing, what I want to be doing. And that was making films. So I quit that job and I started the YouTube channel.
How old were you then?
I want to say 28 probably by the time I was working full time on the channel.
Okay. So now you have a channel ongoing and you still have your salary, paying the bills and all of that.
I've got enough to pay rent and food. I have no worries at all.
Okay.
I was like, what a chump. There's those artists in the past who've had to be like starving, poor, destitute just to live for their art. And me, I've got like the easiest of both worlds, doing things that I enjoy for a small number of hours and I get paid very well for it. So there's no worries.
Was there a specific reason you picked YouTube or that way to make films?
YouTube was kind of an obvious path at that point because it was just like you put whatever you want out here and see if you can get people to watch. In Australia at the time, there was one of the biggest YouTubers in the world. Her name was Natalie Tran. It still is. She had a channel. She has a channel called Community Channel. And I saw her covered in newspapers and things like that. And she was making 6 figures off YouTube in 2010. And she was covered in magazines and stuff. She was probably one of the first 20 creators in the world to hit 1 million subscribers. So I had this example out there of like, okay, here's there's something happening here. Plus the idea, I don't know if you guys remember how revolutionary this was, but in 2007 or 2008, somewhere around there, when Google bought YouTube and announced they were going to start paying people for their stuff on the platform, that seemed totally radical. Because why would a company do you the service of hosting your video so the world can see it and then pay you on top of that directly for that pleasure? It seemed crazy. It was a business model the likes the world has not really seen. I don't know if you want to hold for the...
It's almost there.
Yeah, but I thought it was totally nuts. So YouTube was opening up this thing that was like, I couldn't fathom it. And honestly, I never expected it to get that big, but I just thought, let's take a shot. Here's a place to take a shot. And so I did.
Yeah, fair enough. Your first initial videos you were essentially interviewing people on the street to tackle their misconception about science.
Yes.
Where did you get that idea from, and what did you take away from that format?
Yeah, it's funny because I had a whole bunch of different formats that I started with, and the one that hit was talking to people randomly on the street. And I wonder if this came from something that happened 6 months previously when a friend of mine said, "Hey, I've just seen this article in the newspaper, and it says people don't know how long it takes for the Earth to go around the sun, or they don't know other basic things like what causes the season, what causes the phases of the moon." And I thought, okay, these stats look really ridiculous. Like 1 in 3 people doesn't know how long it takes for the Earth to go around the sun or something. So I said, well, let's just go down to the beach. I'll bring a camera and a microphone. We can just ask people and just see whether we can find data that matches what was published in the newspaper. And I don't know if it's surprising or not, but yeah, the people on the street basically matched the data in the newspaper article. So that was a clue that there was something there. What's more, one of these videos that we made got picked up on Reddit and did quite decent views, like 100,000 views or something, just out of nowhere. So it was a first little inclination of like, actually, people are interested in seeing this. People do want to see this, or this has potential. So I think it was that response from the audience that led me to do more of those videos. I also think that I came across as more natural on camera when I was talking to other people because that is a much more natural interacting environment. When I was speaking directly to camera, I was pretty bad. And you can see that because I haven't deleted any of the videos. If you go back to the earliest videos on the channel, you could see me being very stilted and stiff and really rough. And yeah, so it's out there.
So it's an interesting format because you did face some backlash, and some of it was that you came across sometimes as condescending.
Sure.
Because you're correcting people about a misconception. How did you manage that?
Or people asking me like, why are you trying to make people look stupid? I had a very different view of what we should all be doing, right? And I still have this view personally to this day, which is if I'm wrong about something, I'd like to know. I hope we can all separate our egos from the things that we are thinking. And that was my ethos, and I think a lot of people picked that up. Like some people didn't. Some people thought I was just an asshole. But some people, I think a lot of people, hopefully most people, realize that I'm out there because I love teaching. I love being out there, figuring out what people think, and then showing them something even more incredible. Because science has come up, like the world is not obvious. I think Einstein said, nature is subtle, but it's not malevolent. I'm not sure if I got that in the right order. But the point being that, yeah, the world is not as it seems.
Yeah.
And science is the best way of figuring out how it actually is. And it's fascinating when we learn that, and we can all live, I believe, better lives when we know how it actually works, rather than thinking we know how it works. There's a story I like to tell about this pediatrician, I think he's in the United States, Dr. Benjamin Spock. And he wrote this book in the 1950s, and he updated it in 1958 with a specific piece of advice for how to put a baby down. The advice was put the baby down on their front because this will help them not die. If they spit up, they're not going to choke on it. It'll come out of their mouth, and they're not going to die. Okay? So this is the better way to put a baby down. And studies were done in the following decade that revealed that actually that was bad advice. That kids are more likely to survive if they're put down to sleep on their back. These young babies. But the book was not updated. The book was not updated for decades. And people have now estimated that roughly 50,000 babies died because of that bad advice.
Crazy.
Yeah. So I think like, okay, that's a really sad example, but it's one of these cases where what seems obvious, yeah, okay, the baby's face down, the vomit should come out, is contradicted by the data, and it's probably that breathing gets obstructed or something if the kid accidentally gets face down, and so like it's incredibly sad, but it's so important that we figure out how the world actually works because that can improve people's lives.
It's totally fair.
Yeah.
How did you actually face the backlash though? Did you have to come out with a video? Did you?
I did
did
come
you
out with a
ignore it
video.
or?
Yeah, I did come out. I came out with a video where I talked to myself on camera. One of me playing like ordinary me, and the other me playing like the YouTube commenter or whatever, like a total douchebag. You can still find this video online. It's called "Why Do You Make People Look Stupid?" I think. And so it's this dialogue that I just wrote. I just sat down and wrote it in 20 minutes. And it just hopefully gets this point across that, like, I'm actually excited about helping people figure out what's not real, or things that, like, yeah, everyone thinks that it's this way, but guess what? It's not that way. And couching it in those terms makes people more excited, I think, to learn it. And I know that people would play my videos in classrooms for students, and that would encourage the students to pay more attention to the video and be more excited about it, because they were like, oh, I don't want to be one of those silly people who this guy is, embarrassing in the street. Not that I was trying to embarrass them, but that, they wanted to know it more. I got to say, like, the one other little tidbit is that one of the reasons to make that video was I was actually confronted in person in Perth. So this is West Australia. I was out filming this video about when do you weigh the most or the least, and what happens to the food inside your body. So essentially that's what the video topic was. And I was on this ferry going over to an island, and I was interviewing people on the boat and so on. Later that day, I was walking past a bar in Perth, and these two guys started talking to me. This guy said, hey, I saw you on the boat today, asking people questions. And I think you're up to no good. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, I didn't like the way you were doing that. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm trying to teach science to kids. And he was like, what's your name? And he pulls out this pen. And I'm like, well, you're not going to find it under my name. You have to look for Veritasium. I'm making a YouTube show. And he's like, no, what's your name? And so I tell him my name, and he writes my name down on his hand. And then he's like, if you don't get out of here in the next 30 seconds, I'm going to kick your ass.
Wow.
Yeah. He wanted to pick a fight with me. He wanted to get into a physical altercation because he didn't like the way I was talking to people on this boat. And I was just kind of shocked and flabbergasted. I didn't know what to say. I was trying to tell him, like, the whole point is to make educational video. Like, I'm trying to improve critical thinking in the world. I'm trying to educate all these people, and you want to punch me? Like, it was such a strange reaction. So, I mean, on the one hand, you might just dismiss it, I could have just walked away and said, what an idiot. But on the other hand, that's not how I am. So I walked down and I just contemplated to myself, like, does he have a point? Is there a place where he's coming from where I should be concerned about what I'm doing? Do I need to do something differently? But anyway, the long story was, the ultimate outcome was that video, to try to respond to that concept.
I was about to ask who won the fight.
Yeah, I got the heck out of there. The guy was bigger than me, and he had a friend. At one point, I appealed to the friend, and I was like, are you hearing what your friend is saying? Like, do you endorse this? But they were both just such assholes. Like, I can't even. I can't even.
So tell us about those early challenges before you got traction, before you got revenue. What was it like?
Yeah. See, the funny thing is, you see little glimmers of hope. I had a video in my 3rd month of making YouTube full time that went big, like 500,000 on Reddit. And it got me invited to the YouTube Partner Program, which was essentially, we're going to let you make your own banner. We're going to start paying you some money. And so that was super exciting for me. And I was over the moon. And these numbers were racking up every day. Maybe I should get to, before that video, I was barely getting to like 50 views per video, or maybe 25 or something. I was contacting my friends, I was contacting my family, and I was like, please watch my videos. It's like forcing friends, like, here, let's watch it together, So I have very good friends who didn't say, Derek, these are terrible. What are you doing? This is annoying. Please stop. I had friends who indulged me. So I'm super grateful that I had friends like that. And then the second thing was that this one video in my 3rd month went big, and I was over the moon. And at that point, I think the head of the tutoring company came to me and was like, we want you to come back to the tutoring company some more, do some more work with us. And I was like, hell no, look at this video, lady. Like, I'm killing over here. But maybe if that hadn't been happening, maybe I would have cut short the experiment and just gone back to work like that. Then I had another 6 months that were pretty quiet, and then I had another big spike. So my experience of YouTube was quiet for a while, and then a spike, and then quiet for a while, and then a spike. And probably during some of those quiet periods, I thought about quitting. And again, I would point to my good friends who said, I like what you're doing. Like I had some friends who were teachers and they were like, these videos are actually useful. Please keep doing it. I have some more ideas. Let's try experimenting with some other things. So I think it was that kind of kept me going long enough um, until I could actually, yeah, see that it was going to work.
So, like you'd say, the biggest challenge was maintaining motivation.
Yeah, 100%. My first year, I was looking at my stats recently. My first year, I made $840 from YouTube.
Yep.
My second year, I made $12,500 roughly from YouTube. So it wasn't really a self-sustaining venture until year 3. Year 3, it started paying all my bills, and I quit doing all teaching, all of the work. So since 2013, the channel has been my main gig.
So you'd say 3 years until you were fully sustainable,
Well,
earning a full-time.
2 years of like 2 years of build up, and then by the third year, I could quit everything else.
That's actually fast.
I don't know. I mean, some kids these days do it much faster than that. You have to be lucky, but it can happen faster than that these days.
Oh, do you have any idea on like, well, I'm sure you do, about what could accelerate that kind of growth for anybody creating content or building a brand?
100%. And I think in some ways now it's harder because there's more competitors in the landscape. And in some ways now it's easier. I'll tell you why it's easier. The shorts algorithms in particular are very good at spotting signals that say this is a good video. So, you know, in my early days, for me to get a viral hit, it wasn't that YouTube recognized that it was a good video. It's that the video got posted somewhere else, like Reddit, got traction there, and that drove the views. These days, the platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube all have very effective, I would say, algorithms at picking up the signals from the audience that say, this video is a great video, a lot of people want to see it. And so a channel with not that many subscribers can actually reach a huge audience these days. So I guess my number one piece of advice for anyone thinking about getting into the social media space is make some shorts and launch them out there and see what happens. I think you have to commit to making like at least 10, but probably if you could make 20 or 50, that would be better. I think another benefit is they don't have to be super high production value. They can be on a phone, you know, they can be casual. And in fact, that is part of the grammar and part of the aesthetic of these platforms. So, you know, explaining something while you're making coffee is actually quite compelling, remarkably enough. So, yeah, it's in those ways that I think things have gotten easier. And my number one piece of advice is launch some shorts. Launch quite a few of them because you need that perseverance thing to see if one of them pays off. I have this fun anecdote, or I'm not sure. There's a channel that does career ladder. Have you seen these shorts? Get on the ladder. They throw these ladders out in the street, and then they go up on the ladder, and they try to guess what the other person's career is, right? Okay. Those people who make that series, and it's a wildly popular series now, they make a living off it. It's a whole thing. They made 50 of those before one really hit. So they made 50 before one did much better than, say, 10 or 20,000 views.
But that doesn't guarantee that the next ones will hit either.
It doesn't, but they have managed to build a brand out of it. And I think you realize that it can be a brand once it hits a few million. And then you keep doing the same thing and people get familiar with it and you start to build that audience and people keep coming back for it. Now they know it and the whole thing just grows. But what I just think what's so remarkable is if they'd stopped at 48, they would never know that they were actually sitting on a gold mine, you know? So perseverance is a key part of this equation, and I know how hard it is because I nearly quit, you know? So yeah, it's not the only thing, but perseverance is kind of essential.
Yeah. So which brings me back to Veritasium, because over time your videos turn into full-on production, cinematic storytelling, deep investigations. Was this a natural progression of your work, or did you sit down one day like, okay, now I'm going professional?
No, it's a very natural progression. Like I always wanted to just kind of experiment around. So the videos on the channel are quite the grab bag. From like sometimes I'm doing an experiment, sometimes I'm interviewing a scientist, sometimes it's just a history story, sometimes there's animations, you know. So there was just natural evolution. Sometimes I'm talking more about philosophy, sometimes I'm talking more about, you know, some topics, psychology, social science, bits and pieces from all over the place. It's just basically what I find interesting. So my main metric is if I think that's really cool and I'm interested to know about it, learn about it, I'm interested to explain it to someone else. So it's such a grab bag, so all over the place. And I think over the years, I got tired of doing the basic like let me explain to you why a heavy object and a light object drop together, hit the ground at the same time. That sort of stuff just got to feel very basic. And even now, a lot of science stories will to me feel like, oh, like one of my team wants to maybe make a video about adaptive optics, which is a way that telescopes on Earth can vary their mirrors in real time to counteract turbulence in the atmosphere that's causing the wiggling of the light that's coming from stars. But to me, that idea is now too boring to make a video about. So I feel like I've just grown, I've evolved, and so now something that I may have thought was cool in the past, I don't think is as cool now. And also, like, I have to make a video for an audience of 10 or 20 million people, so I have to be thinking about them. My brain is basically an audience simulator where I try to like think like, okay, what do they want to know at this point? What are the questions they're going to ask? What are the topics they're going to find interesting? So I think it's a natural progression. Also, YouTube essentially pushed us to make longer videos by optimizing for watch time rather than views. They essentially advantaged really long videos. This happened around the early 2010s, and what you saw as an immediate downstream consequence of that was that gamers shot to the top of YouTube. This is like the reason PewDiePie is number one, or was number one, was really, I think, because of this algorithmic change. But then they realized, well, we can't have YouTube only be for gamers, so they had to do other tweaks in the background so that other areas could also survive. But I think things like animation, things like comedy were suppressed by an algorithmic change like that. So I've spent a lot of my life thinking about how the structure of the system that we exist in affects the nature of the content that works and thrives in that system. And it totally drives me nuts. It's crazy.
Which brings me to my next point, which is what strategies did you use to grow the channel quicker? Actual tips, things people can use.
Yeah. To actually grow the channel. I mean, the one obvious thing is you experiment. Step one is it worked for Korea Ladder that they posted 50 of essentially the same thing. But I would say, well, that's not what I did, and it's not what I'd recommend you do. I would recommend experimentation. So, you could try some with high production value. You could try some when you're lazy laying there on the couch using your phone. You could try some where you open with action. Obviously, opening with action is so important because the data that we get from all of these platforms, particularly for shorts, are telling us that people make the decision to watch or not watch in the first 2 seconds. And maybe even the first second. I don't know. So the point being, what is happening in the first second or 2 seconds such that someone's intrigued enough to stick around and watch? So for me, experimentation is number one. And that's something I think I did better than almost anyone else who started with me at the same time. Was that rather than picking a format and sticking to it, I was just totally disorganized and was like, you know what, this week I'm just going to talk about, I don't know, something random, the bacteria in your guts, or whatever I feel like talking about that week. That's what I'm talking about, and sometimes, sometimes I'd be on a trip somewhere and they'd be like, hey, we have this quiet room here. I don't know if you guys have seen these anechoic chambers. It's basically a room where the walls absorb all the sounds. It's basically like the quietest place in the universe. And I had seen this thing online saying that if you spend 45 minutes there, you go crazy, and no one spent more than 45 minutes in there. And I said, okay, since I'm here, can you put me in the room, turn out all the lights, which is apparently meant to make it worse, and then come get me in an hour or whatever, or like give me a walkie-talkie so I can scream to you in case I'm in trouble. But anyway, so that's how videos like that happen. So it's like totally, experiment so widely, try to find, things, and then you see how people react to it. And where people react really well to it, you do more in that vein. And that's basically the recipe, I would say.
Were you also optimizing for the hook? Were you optimizing for smaller tricks here and there?
These days, yes. I would say, my number one thing, and it comes back to that, how are you grabbing attention in the early seconds? The number one thing is like no intros. A lot of TVs will have like we often go out at night and look up at the stars and wonder about our place in the universe. Like, cut that. Cut all of that.
You lose the viewer.
Straight into something. No. It can work on a TV, but it doesn't work on a phone. It doesn't work when people are, in the shopping line or wherever they're looking at this video. You need to be straight into it. So as rapidly as you can get into the material and get through the material, that's what you need to be doing.
We've seen that across any social media pretty much. We've seen it on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
That first sentence,
Yep.
those first few words.
Yep.
If you lost the reader already, you're done. On Instagram, we see it the same way. If that first slide is useless, you're gone.
Yep. And the interesting thing about YouTube is every video starts with a click. Rather than a swipe up and you just get served something, every video on YouTube, you typically have to click on. So people have to click on a title and a thumbnail. That's a single image and probably about 50 characters, max 50 characters. So what are you putting in that title and thumbnail? Now, I was pretty terrible at picking the good titles and thumbnails for my videos. So I was successful kind of despite my inability to make good titles and thumbnails. But that's something that I've focused a lot more on and try to figure out, like, how do we do this? Now we have a whole slew. For every video that goes out, we probably have 20, 30, 50 different thumbnail options where we can grab, our top 3. YouTube will allow you to ABC test now, which you could never do before, but you can now. And so we'll be trying different title and thumbnail angles to see which ones hit. But that's one of the most challenging parts of the game and so important if you want to do well at long-form YouTube.
Interesting. So at peak growth,
Yeah.
what was your life like? I'm talking about the challenges, whether personal, whether logistical, at peak growth.
In a way, peak growth is now.
Well,
but if we ignore now,
because there's a reason to. We'll
I
get
mean,
to later.
In 2021, I went pretty hard making YouTube videos for a few reasons. One, the pandemic was still kind of happening in Los Angeles, so people weren't doing very much. There was not much going on. 2, I could see 10 million subscribers on the horizon. So I was like, that's my goal this year, 10 million subs. 3, I had hired a couple people. And I waited much longer than probably anyone in this room would wait to hire people for a couple reasons. One, I'm insanely conservative. So my worry about being a YouTuber was like, this could disappear overnight. I could stop getting views, I could stop getting money, and if I have employees, that'll feel terrible. If it's just me, I'll figure something out, So I felt terrible taking on employees. Also, super stingy of like, why am I going to pay someone when I could do that myself? I'm probably better and faster. Why would I hire someone? Now I got to explain it to them. That's annoying. That's boring. I don't want to do that. So I had all kinds of problems. I had the standard entrepreneurial problem, which is like, I knew how to do the thing and I didn't want to pay anyone because they probably wouldn't know how to do the thing as well as I would. And I'd have to find them and all that, deal with them, all, that sort of struggle. So for all those kinds of reasons, I never hired anyone till 2021. Then I hired about 2 or 3 people and I worked harder than ever before that year, partly because I needed to make sure they had things to do. It's like, oh, I don't, it's like late at night. It's like, I had people in different time zones. I was like, oh, Peter's going to be up in 5 hours. Like, what can I give him to do? So I'd be doing more work so he would have something. And then I'd get up. There was like always people in every time zone. There was always people working, which meant I could always work at all hours of the day. And we were trying to put out more videos. We're getting more interest from sponsors. I was doing all-nighters. It was horrendous. Some nights instead of tucking my kids into bed, I was downstairs editing. So yeah, there was huge growth that year, and we hit 10 million subscribers. And my wife said, "This is unsustainable. You can't keep doing this." And I said, "I know, this is really bad." So we went to Australia for a month. I said, like, January, we're just gonna take the month off. We'll be in Australia. We'll hang out, just have some family downtime, and we'll try to regroup. But yeah, that was a peak growth year.
And what were the main sources of revenue? Was it sponsorships? Was it ads? What was it?
So revenue for a YouTuber, I'd say, is very commonly 50-50, YouTube ads and sponsorships. For me these days, it's probably more like 60% sponsorships and 40% YouTube direct advertising. But that's a good bet for almost anyone on the platform. Yeah, somewhere around there.
How were you able to get your biggest sponsor? Let's say
Everything's inbound.
back in then.
Everything's inbound. When the channel gets big enough, you just have emails in all the time. And a lot of the emails I have to say no to. People like oil companies. I have to say no every time they send those emails. And there's a lot of zeros, and I have to say no. Yeah, you can't sell out.
Yeah, makes sense. So 2023, you took on investors.
Yeah. So actually 2022, a couple companies approached me, a couple startups who were investing in the media space started contacting me mid-year, and it was kind of ideal. because I was like, here I am in this unsustainable position. I've just worked really hard for a year, so revenue is pretty good last year. Profit was pretty good last year. I can't imagine continuing to work myself at this pace. And now I've got people coming along who are interested in buying or at least some of this business.
So, what were your metrics when you started getting interest from private equity or investors, in terms of revenue or in terms of followers, subscribers,
Well,
more or less?
followers, subscribers, we were up around past 10 million subscribers, but I don't know that that's essential. I think it was just partly that the industry came to this point where there were startups, there were people looking at the creator economy and saying, "Wow, it's on this kind of trajectory. If we can grab some businesses at this point, we can continue to ride that upward wave." And we're seeing this huge rising tide in the creator economy. So I can see clever business people like getting wind of that and feeling like now is the time to strike. So it feels like a couple, 2, 3, 4 businesses just all kind of popped up overnight around that 2021, 2022 period, and they started buying out YouTube assets, buying up YouTube channels.
Okay.
And I think one thing they saw was if you're buying a channel that's just like a personality, just like someone being like, "Hey, it's me, Derek, and I'm gonna show you how to make my coffee today," or whatever. Like I don't know what kind of boring vloggy stuff people do, but like that would be a bad investment because that is fully dependent on that person forever. Whereas I think a lot of these businesses saw science channels and educational channels and thought, okay, we can run those in that way, and they can sort of stand alone as media businesses, and people will come to them for the content, for the education, more than necessarily the personality. So at that point, we were definitely doing millions in revenue and millions in profit.
Okay.
I can't say exactly how much, but yeah. And then the offers were around 5 or 6 times EBITDA was the sort of the way to value
Makes sense.
the company at that point.
Okay. So in 2023, you did accept one of the offers.
I did.
You took on investors.
That's
so
Yeah.
was that because you were pretty burned out? You were about done?
Yeah, I mean, the offer they made to me was, we're going to buy up some of your equity. So we're going to give you cash right away. We are going to continue to pay you your fraction of the profit. Great. We're going to reduce your work hours down to about 40 hours a month. Amazing. You can work from anywhere. Yeah, so there was just like so many good things about it. We're gonna take on hiring. We're gonna take on scaling. We'll work on other projects, growing this business, figuring out all your revenue streams. Like I wasn't doing much on TikTok. I wasn't doing much on Instagram. Wasn't because I didn't think these things were worthwhile. Just because I had such limited bandwidth, I wasn't gonna do it. But it's like they took that on. They were like, we're gonna run your channels in Korean, in Portuguese, in Spanish, in whatever, German, and yeah. So now we have all these channels in other languages. We have dubs that are coming in all kinds of different languages. We're reaching a wider audience than we ever have before. We're making more minutes of content than ever before, and I'm working less than ever before. So it was totally win-win. Like there was no way I could have said no to that. But right, that's the thing. I thought that the business fundamentally depended on me and wasn't worth anything outside of me. So if someone comes up to you and offers you money for the business and you still get to leave, they don't own you for the rest of your life, like that's a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so you took the deal.
Yep.
A lot of people said you sold out. What would you answer these people?
I don't know if they said I sold out, but well, some did. Yeah. In the comments, there's a certain amount of like, this channel's now owned by private equity, like don't trust it, they're, wrong, and so on. I mean, my sense is people are right to be wary about change, and they're right to be wary about business interests. But we've been working together now for 2.5 years, me and this company, and the channel has never done better. Over the last 3 years, we've grown at least 30% per year. So in some ways you could say, well, why didn't I just hang on to everything and keep growing at 30% a year? I think partly because like I didn't want to be really the entrepreneur that I think is needed to do this. Or maybe I didn't have the stomach for the kind of investments that they're making. Quadrupling expenditure, having a staff now of like 25 or more. A lot of that makes me very uneasy. Mm-hmm. And I actually feel much better just being like, that it's not my full responsibility at this point. Yeah.
So you don't have majority anymore.
right.
You have a team.
Yes.
But you do still show up on some videos.
Oh, in basically all of them to this
Okay.
point. Yeah.
So have you guys figured out the idea of what happens to the creator's face that shows up on these videos after he's not the majority owner anymore?
Yeah.
And how can we take that off? What's going on around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that any business is worried about dependency on one person, right? Key man risk. So they want to make sure that there's other people who can front the videos, who can do the voiceover and pieces to camera. So they're trying to build out a stable of, other hosts, which can be in the videos in addition to me. And that's how they're dealing with this risk.
Are they doing enough views, on par, less, more?
Yeah, we haven't thus far tried a video that has none of me in it.
Okay.
So that'll be a pretty wild experiment when that happens. But thus far, the videos are doing better than ever. Yeah.
Cool. Do you know what's next for Veritasium?
I think I think the whole point would be to ramp up. This is an organization now whose mission is still driven by the mission that drove me, which is I want there to be more critical thinkers in the world. I want people to look at different topics and say, how would I know if I were wrong? I want us to be better at getting into dialogue about complex issues, better at looking at data and figuring out what is actually true versus what just appears to be this way. So, this mission is big, and in some ways, I have constrained it for years just by virtue of my own inability to scale myself or to scale what I'm doing. So I feel like we're better able to achieve the mission now than ever before. So we've just launched a Kickstarter, for example. I'm not sure if it's still live right now. Is it still live right now? Okay, I'm getting some nods. Kickstarter has raised over $1 million. It is for a board game, which is a science trivia game, which also involves wagering based on your confidence level. It's still live to this point. I don't know. If anyone's interested in a science trivia game where you can wager based on your confidence, go check it out. Over 10,000 backers and over $1 million has been raised. So it's projects like that which I think will grow. I think there will be a podcast. It's remarkable that we haven't had a podcast. Again, it just reflects my limited bandwidth and my limited imagination and ability to build out these things. I think we'll do more in shorts. We have historically basically done none in shorts. We'll manage to make more videos. So at this point, we're aiming for at least 4 videos a month, but we haven't hit that yet. So, yeah, these are the places where I think Veritasium is going to go. It's going to grow the amount of content, the number of different languages, the different media, different platforms, but it's all governed by the same mission. Like, we want to make the best science videos in the world, and we want to improve the level of critical thinking out there. 2 more days. 2 more days. 2 more days if anyone wants to get the founder's edition of the board game.
What about Derek Muller? Where is he going?
I don't know. I've always wanted to be creative. I always wanted to make films, be an actor, director, writer, something like that. So I imagine I'll do more stuff in that vein.
I have a few questions related to kind of like introspection and your profile. Like, for instance, you're really good at science and filmmaking. You merge creative with rational, and that's a rare profile. Have you ever had a tension to reconcile those two sides of you?
I don't know. I think it's great. I think there's someone who talked about the unique stack of the person. I'm not a software developer, but the idea that maybe I'm not the best scientist in the world. I'm certainly not. But I'm a pretty elite science teacher, I would argue. And I have fairly elite YouTubing skills. When you stick those things together, I'd be in the top couple people in the world who are science YouTubers, I guess. You know what I mean? So I think when you have disparate interests and you find ways to be, fairly good at both, you stack those together, now you're among a very elite, very tiny group in the world. And when you find that place, right, that's a recipe for success. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I don't see any tension there at all. I only see the beauty of merging those things.
Absolutely. It's just rare to be good at both.
I don't know if it's rare. I mean, for me, it's my whole experience.
Well, take it as a compliment.
Yeah, maybe. But like everyone has something that's rare, right?
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel lucky that it's rare in a way that's worked out. I feel lucky to be in this sort of survivorship position to be in front of you and say like, guys, it all worked out. But I very well know that it might not have. So, yeah.
When you did your PhD, it was a lot around the idea of using or tackling misconception as a way to teach.
Yeah.
You later used storytelling extensively as a way to teach.
Yeah.
Other notable ways to teach are gamification, entertainment. Looking back at your experience now, with all of the things you know and you've done, what would you say is the best way to teach or change someone's mind?
Oof. I kind of think an amazing teacher and a very small number of students and a whiteboard or any resource that exists on the internet, like that's kind of my ideal situation. A great teacher and a student is kind of like it's the best. I kind of don't think there's a way to do better than that.
1-1.
One-on-one. One-on-one, I think if you look at the literature, there's something called the 2 sigma effect, which is this idea that one-on-one tutoring produces learning gains 2 sigma above basically anything else, above classroom teaching. So, I try to spend time with each of my kids and teach them one-on-one.
Okay.
I think it is so effective. If you're teaching one-to-many, one of the studies I did was I'm going to make the cleanest, clearest explanation of a physics concept. And I'm going to use animations, I'm going to use demonstrations, I'm going to show force arrows and accelerations and all this. I'm going to do the best textbook explanation that is possible with multimedia, and we're going to play that for a group of students. Now, in a separate video clip, I'm going to depict a student and a tutor talking to each other. And in that dialogue, the student will bring up a misconception. We won't warn anyone in advance that, hey, this is a misconception. We'll just have that student say that thing. And then the tutor will say, I don't know, does that make sense? Because, and then they'll, sort of counter it. And eventually, the two of them will come around to the right way, or the scientifically accurate way of thinking about this situation. Now, this video is probably 50, 60% longer than the clear, concise, expository summary. But I would test groups of students with these 2 videos where they would do a set of questions before the test. They watch that video, either one, randomly assigned. Then they do the same set of questions afterwards. And I was thinking, will this change their minds? Will this improve their answers? And will it affect their confidence? Like maybe watching both videos would result in the same improvement since the same correct physics information is in both. But maybe the increase in confidence would be more with that student one, because now they could be more certain that they understand what was wrong and what's right. When I got the results back, both groups showed the exact same increase in confidence. But this group that got the expository summary, the clearest lecture explanation I could give, with animations, diagrams, everything, their pre-test was statistically indistinguishable from their post-test. They learned nothing, and yet they got confident. They got more confident, like they knew what was going on. This other group, their accuracy doubled. They got twice as many right on the post-test than the pre-test. This was clear indication to me that in order for people to change their minds about things that they are thinking beforehand, to change people's minds about misconceptions, alternative ideas, you have to address those ideas. They have to be present in some way. You have to, because you need to meet people where they are with what they're thinking, and that includes things that they're thinking that are wrong. And that's a really challenging thing to do. But that's why I think those videos of mine in the early days were so effective, was because we brought up the wrong idea first, then we dealt with it to get to the right idea.
So you think that would be useful in a world filled with misinformation or propaganda? Or would you say this is the best way to correct misconceptions?
I would. And you have to do it with empathy and with, like you don't want to be making fun of anyone. You don't want to be triggering anyone's defense mechanisms. You really want to say to someone, all right, is the world flat? Yes, it's flat. Okay. So what would be some ways that we could show that it's flat, for example? And you can go out and try to do some experiments, and then you're going to end up falsifying what you're trying to do, or whatever. But the whole point being, whatever you think is true, think about pieces of evidence that support it, and think about how would we know if we're wrong. I think that's such an important question, and it's a question people don't ask themselves enough. But just opening it up to like, is there any piece of evidence that would make you question this? And then trying to see, like, is there any experiment we could do that would tell between our two beliefs? I think that's such a wonderful place you can get to. Yeah, if people have differing opinions, fine. But is there a place where they come into conflict in such a way that an experiment can reveal which perspective matches reality?
What about storytelling as a way to change perceptions? You use it all the time.
Oh yeah, storytelling is great. And there's times where people don't have a lot of misconceptions. For example, we made a video about what really happened to Amelia Earhart. Some people might think it's a mystery, some people might think there's a conspiracy, or that she didn't actually disappear, or whatever. But we take you through the story and we go through the physics of what happened, and there's actually a series of unfortunate events that happened with regard to her radio antennas, such that ultimately she was not able to send and receive, and she was trying to use radio to find a tiny island in the Pacific. The frequency she was using was the wrong frequency. And it's stuff like that where it's like, well, we can demonstrate this. I can demonstrate it in a field with you with the same kind of radio direction finding antenna. So there's times when misconceptions are not the problem, but just there's, you just don't know the story. So telling the story is great. And I find tying scientific concepts to narratives is wonderful because people naturally follow a narrative. And then you introduce the scientific information right when you need it to understand what's happening in the story. And that helps us, pulls us along and gets us invested in it.
It's extremely powerful when you combine storytelling with facts and numbers.
Totally.
And it's very, very weak to just throw out numbers and facts
100%.
on their own.
Yeah.
And it's tricky to just use storytelling alone because then you're probably in the realm of fiction.
Yeah.
So you do need to combine the fiction and the nonfiction, the storytelling and the facts and numbers.
Totally. And for me, I just love when it's critical to the story what the numbers and facts are saying, or what the equations say. Yeah. For me, that's I love that.
Absolutely. Looking back to your through your expertise, your time, really, like all of the things you've done, the journey. Would you say? What would you change if you could change something?
I almost feel like I would change nothing. But if I had to change something, if you gave me the chance to live my life again, maybe when I got to be 17, graduating high school, I might have just taken a year and just tried to do something creative right off the bat.
And not listen to your dad or someone else telling you that's not serious.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I was just terrified of ending up destitute, broke, homeless, whatever. My number one thing was I need to be able to take care of myself. That was the number one fear. But if I could go back and try it again, if you're like giving me another shot, yeah, why not?
Would you change anything else?
Hopefully I'd have more guts this time.
Would you change anything else?
No, I mean, in fact, like I probably wouldn't even change that thing because I'm so incredibly pleased with how it's all gone. I feel so lucky to be in this position, feel amazingly fortunate to have basically done my dream job for 15 years, and now to have incredible flexibility to spend time with my family, to travel the world, to explore new projects, to maybe make films or a podcast or whatever I feel like doing next. I feel like I have full flexibility. So yeah.
Also looking back throughout your journey, what would you say is the biggest lesson you've learned?
I mean, for me, okay, I'm gonna break it down into two things. Biggest lesson number one is experimentation. I touched on this. The whole point is you have to be trying different things. And getting a no is often more informative than getting a yes. There's this story about these Europeans who say that all swans are white. And you can go out into your world and you can say, there's a white swan, there's a white swan, there's a swan over here. What color is it? White. It's like, okay, well, that's all evidence that swans are only white. And then at some point they arrive in Australia and they see these black swans there. And they say, oh, it just takes the one black swan to make you realize that the first proposition was false. I did this number game with people in the street. It's one of my favorite videos. And everyone looks to confirm what they believe. And so few people ask a question expecting the answer to be no, I feel like more people need to be doing that because the no gives you much more information than the yes. Because you might have a really narrow view and actually the view is much wider. So one thing I would say is experimentation. The second thing I would say is be aware of things that are governed by power laws. We recently made a video about power laws, but the idea of a power law is it's something where you don't get a typical bell-shaped distribution. You don't get a typical normal curve where there's an average and a standard deviation. A great example of something that follows a power law is wealth. So there is no average wealth in the world. There is no standard deviation to wealth in the world. There is just a lot of people with a little bit of wealth, fewer people with more wealth, fewer. But there's way more people who have, you know, billions or hundreds of billions than you would expect if you just took a kind of normal distribution. You think about, like, what's your chance of finding someone who's 10 feet tall, 4 meters tall? Like, it's like 0, right? But what's your chance of finding someone who has, you know, 1,000 times the median income or something? You know, like, they're out there. Same thing with YouTube videos. Almost every YouTube video, 97% of YouTube videos will receive fewer than 10,000 views. 97% of videos will receive fewer than 10,000 views. But 0.1% will receive more than 1 million. So the point is, you have to figure out, if you're going to be a YouTuber, how to be in that 0.1%.
It's very interesting because somehow our brain expects proportionality. So if I'm doing this today, tomorrow I should get this effect. But most things are compounding through time. So for a long time, it looks like nothing is happening. And all of a sudden, the curve, the chart goes bonkers.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it is. It compounds over time. For a long time, you have to believe that you're doing the right thing, even though you're not getting the reward.
Yeah.
Until one day you're right.
Yeah.
And do you know why we expect proportionality naturally?
I think our brains just aren't very good at exponentials. It was the same at the beginning of COVID, where they were like, oh, today there's like 20 cases, tomorrow there's 40 cases. It's like, okay, well, you know, this doesn't seem like it's going to be that bad. Yeah, 2 weeks later, you're like, holy crap, you know? So it's the same kind of issue. I remember having this very, you know, similar kind of thinking when I was starting the YouTube channel and I was starting to get money, and I was like, okay, if I could get the videos to 10,000 views each, and I made 100 videos in a year, you know, that would be 1 million views. Yeah, that would get me $2,000. And I was like very deflated by that. You know, it was like, if I just use modest numbers, nothing happens. But that's the thing, you know, 10x, 100x, 1000x, they happen online.
Yep.
And they're so hard to see coming. Yeah.
That's how investment works as well.
Exactly.
Would you like to add anything before we open up the floor?
I don't think so. I think we've touched on a lot of great stuff.
Quite a bit.
I'm happy to answer any questions people have. Yeah.
Derek, thank you very much.
I'm curious, obviously you're a scientist and a critical thinker at your core. With AI shifting extremely rapidly, especially in the media space, how do you tackle the challenge of critical thinking when very soon it's going to be extremely difficult to distinguish what's real with versus what's not real? And how do you incorporate it in your own videos?
I feel like you've asked me an impossible question. I don't think anyone can answer that question adequately. What I can say is it feels to me like we've already been living in a world where there is no reason to doubt one's worldview. In other words, if you think about the US, there can be a Republican worldview and a Democratic worldview. And it seems like even without AI, they've had no problems convincing themselves that they are both have 100%, you know, completely correct. Nothing dents those bubbles. So AI coming in maybe is less of a concern. Maybe it's just like, well, yeah, they were already there, and now they'll have like the video proof to prove it or whatever. I don't know. So maybe it doesn't get that bad. But I mean, I am worried about AI full stop in terms of how it affects us. Maybe my biggest worry with AI is that it allows students to never have to struggle through writing an essay. And if you never struggle through having to write an essay or 100 essays, which I think is core to the process of figuring out how to sort your thinking out and figure out how to be a writer, how do you develop these sorts of skills? You know what I mean? Like if you don't do thousands of editions, you just don't get good at mental math. So like, That's what I want my kids to be doing. I want you to not use AI to do the things that it can do for you. Even though we could argue that, like, okay, well, it's just a tool, but it might debilitate you mentally, because I think you have to go through those processes to get good at things like, yeah, formulating your thoughts and writing an essay. So I don't know. Those are my major concerns, but I hear your concern, and I think we are. It is a sort of terrifying, brave new world. My only hope is that what comes with that is maybe an increased level of skepticism from everyone, because now you have to be on your guard all the time. But then that raises new issues where you're going to see a real video and you can dismiss it as fake. So I don't know. We're going to see. It is such a mess, and it's only going to get messier. And I don't have good answers. Well, yeah, it's devastating. It's horrifying. It's very concerning.
You spoke about perseverance as one of the things that can help us. I work a lot with kids and teaching kids how to use storytelling to impact the world in a positive way. And oftentimes I meet kids that don't believe that their voice can change anything. I wonder if you have any advice for young storytellers. 'Cause I want them to create those 50 short videos, but how do you get them to believe that their first video can have any importance in the world?
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if maybe less than thinking about how their first video influences the world, I wonder if they can think about making it for themselves, or making it for you, or making it for family and friends, people who are close to them. I wonder if in our society now we worry too much about the adoration of strangers and not enough about just sort of the people around us, the people closest to us. I think it's so important. You know, I was talking earlier about how I think teaching works best one-on-one. And I think this idea of confidence, self-efficacy, what can I do, what is possible, I think that can also be really well connected one-on-one. The reason I kept going in the early days wasn't because I was super confident in me or because I was getting great responses from an audience. It's because I had a few good friends who were like, these are useful. Please don't stop. You know, like that sort of thing, that goes such a long way. So I guess that's what I would say is like the one-on-one human connection. It's one of these things we can't replace. I want to see more of that in the world. And I think that can really, hopefully, lift these kids up. I also think, like, once you get one win under your belt, you know, the next win can get a little easier, you know? So showing them that, like, yeah, let's build one thing together. And then they get a good response, even from just, you know, 3, 5 people or their family or friends, you know, that can help them take the next step. So yeah, focus first on the small, on the personal, and hopefully grow from there. Yeah.
Hey, thanks, Derek. Great talk. A quick question. It seems like nowadays, regardless of the industry that you're in, if you're a business leader, maybe not a content creator per se, but it's really important to have some sort of presence online or some sort of content that's about you, just in terms of getting recognized or your business reputation. What would you recommend for people who aren't necessarily full-time content creators, but want to have some sort of online presence?
I think it's smart. I think it's smart for anyone who's an entrepreneur, who has a business, particularly a consumer-facing business, to find a way to have an online profile. I do think it's smart. But again, it comes down to these sort of these kind of power laws of, you know, if you try to do kind of the average thing or the median thing, it'll probably just get lost in the noise and it's not really going to shake things up. So maybe in some ways, the argument could be if the option is between doing something average and ordinary versus doing nothing, and you'd rather do nothing, just do nothing, because this is probably not going to have much payoff anyway. But if you do want to engage in this territory, if you do want to engage in social media, try to be one of the power law winners. Try to be at that very high end of the tail of that distribution. So the example I would give you is a guy who is selling glowing signs. I don't know if you spent much time on TikTok, but I feel like you will come across this guy who makes responses to people being kind of weird or whatever, and he's just funny, and he connects everything back to his signs. So like he'll respond to the clip and quickly say, "Oh, that's weird, but you need to," like, you know, or like, I don't know. I'm not doing the clips justice, but he has probably 10x, 100x his business by having this incredible viral side. So the suggestion is, either do nothing if you think that what you're going to do is pretty bland, or really go for it. try to do something that's at the very big tail end, because that's really going to move the needle. For me personally, I post almost nothing on Instagram, personal of a personal nature. I post nothing on Snapchat. I post nothing on TikTok. I'm not trying to promote anything. The business, can now do that on various platforms. But me personally, yeah, most of the pictures I take are of my kids, and I'm not posting those anywhere. So, yeah, that's how I deal with. Like, I kind of hate social media. I'm not on Twitter. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
I have like a kind of theoretical question about teaching. And a long time ago, I read a book of a philosophy of science, and it was like it was like saying in class when you have like mass education, there's always this kind of problem that you give the solution, and then you teach you give your students the exercise. For example, if you teach physics, you will explain at first the law of gravity, and then you will give exercise about that. And the writer was saying something like you should do just the opposite. Like you should just take a pencil, drop it falls, and then you should say, okay, guys, now let's try to understand why the moon doesn't fall. Like you start from the problem instead of from the solution. And to me, it was fascinating because I always had this problem because they always gave me a solution, and I don't think it's great for critical thinking. So I just wanted to ask you, how do you see that? If you ever applied in your like professional life, if you think it's something actually feasible, because it sounds on a theory level sounds very nice, but maybe it's difficult to apply, especially if you have more students.
Yeah. I think this idea is a good one. And it's something that we try to do, something I try to do if I'm teaching. It's also something that we try to do in the videos. So something I preach to my writers who I work with is that we always want to write in the format problem solution, never solution problem. I also try to get rid of the idea of a thesis statement. I never want to look at a part of the script and see, here's a thesis statement, which we're then going to support with evidence. Never want to work in that order. I always want to work in sort of an order of narrative and reflection. And this is useful in storytelling. It's also useful in teaching. It's useful in science. You want to create the question, the mystery first, and then move through sort of the logical process to the solution. That's always what we're trying to do. So I guess I'm just in 100% agreement with what you're saying. I think it's far more effective, far more engrossing to give someone the mystery and pull them through. And they'll be more interested to learn about, the solution that way. Trust, 100%.
Who are some of the scientists whom you admire, the filmmakers and or actors or writers whom you admire, since those are two areas of your work? And then you mentioned that you were very competitive as a student. So as a scientist, YouTuber, who are your competitors out there that you feel you're competing with?
Right.
Or Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example.
Yeah. It's funny, if I take the question backwards, on the issue of competition and competitors, I don't really feel like competition exists in the same way on YouTube as it used to, or as in other fields. You could say my competitors are people like Vsauce, Smarter Every Day, Steve Mold, Minute Physics, Physics Girl, I'm Aesop Science, Kurzgesagt, Mark Rober. You can list off a lot of YouTubers who are making things in the science space. I think something that we talked, we're all friends. I met some of the biggest science YouTubers back in 2012, and we've maintained friendships ever since. Many of them came to my wedding. Like, they're just lovely, wonderful people. We're all so friendly, and we're not competitive really at all with each other. The idea is, if someone watches like Smarter Every Day, they're more likely to watch me, and vice versa, than in opposition. It's not like there's so much content out there that watching Steve Mold means you're not going to watch me. Watching Vsauce means you're not going to watch. No, it means you're more likely to watch me. So the fact that we're all together, we're all friends, means it just, the dynamic isn't such that the competition is the thing that arises. Much more likely to be collaborative and work together, and it raises all boats. In terms of people that I admire in the film industry, long been a fan of Paul Thomas Anderson. Love those films. Yeah, Coen Brothers. I don't know. There's a lot of different things that I love to watch. I love foreign films. Like Amélie is a favorite of mine. Il Postino, another favorite cinema parody. So some of these, I don't know, kind of dates me a little bit, but I love those films. In terms of scientists, it's funny. I think a lot of scientists are incredible, including ones that I've worked with. But I feel like the people that I sort of look up to the most in that space are often science communicators. So, Carl Sagan, Bill Nye, Brian Greene, Brian Cox, these people are also, friends and mentors. I love the guys at Radiolab. So Jad Abumrad and Robert Krulwich. Again, friends, mentors, also just incredible people to look up to. So yeah, there's a lot of great examples of what I'm trying to do in the world, which is, yeah, find some beauty, find some things that are incredible, and share that with other people.
Thank you. I'm trying to run a baby channel on YouTube, and I'd love to get your thoughts on titles, actually, because I see the algorithm pushes you towards these extremely clickbaity titles. And like Diary of a CEO said, they lied to you, doctors lied to you. They used lying 157 times last year. And I don't love it. I don't feel like it's super accurate or responsible, like use somehow of my content. And I see that you have a very nice approach. And I wonder whether you have tested more clickbaity titles with cap like all caps, for instance, and whether you kind of sacrifice some views for the sake of having, let's say, more accurate titles.
Yeah, just let me ask about a baby channel. Is this like a parenting channel or a channel for babies? Or it's just a small channel?
It's like with 2K view
Okay.
followers, so
Good.
subs.
And it's not about babies.
No, it's about female longevity.
Say it again.
Female health and longevity.
Female health and longevity. I love that. Okay. This is a really hard one. We have published videos with titles and thumbnails that I personally am not comfortable with. We feel pushed in this direction of find whatever works. I still go into our Slack channel on the thumbnails and I say to the guys, this is too clickbaity. This is not the way. Like, make it more accurate. Bring back like some semblance of reality. The team gets carried away. So I'm always pulling us back and trying to anchor us on, things that I think are accurate, right, and true. Having said that, there are just better ways to phrase things, and sometimes it's not immediately obvious. So we do a lot of experimentation, right? Like after the fact, we'll go back and we'll change the title and thumbnail sometimes, and it can dramatically improve performance. The key example I'll give you is a video I launched about asteroids, and I called it Asteroids, Earth's Biggest Threat. And I gave it this beautiful thumbnail that I got from like Getty Images, and it looks like, this view from space of this huge asteroid splashing into the Earth and just all this material coming away, and it looks very dramatic, looks like a documentary poster, that kind of thing. And the video was one of the worst of my last 10. It was like my 9th out of the last 10 when I first launched it the first day. So on target for maybe 1.5 million views. Fine, but not great. And I racked my brains about it for several days, and I changed the title and thumbnail a few times. Nothing really worked. But finally, I landed upon, on day 3, this title, These Are the Asteroids to Worry About. And it was an image of like New York City from above, and then had these different size asteroids. And there was a big arrow pointing to one of the smaller ones. And so it was sort of like, why is it those ones that they're the asteroids to worry about? And the video delivers on that title. But it's just there's a lot of different ways that we could have got into that. And that one had this curiosity gap. It had a hook for people that made them click on it much more than the other titles and thumbnails. And within a couple days, video blew up to sort of 12 million, 14 million views. So it was kind of like a 10x just based on that title and thumbnail change. That video now has 80 million views. So over the long tail, it's continued to ride this way. It was one of the best performing of all time. So it's 100% important that you find titles and thumbnails that will get people engaged. So yeah, experimentation is huge. But I'd look at your intros and stuff and see if those could be snappier and punchier, and, can you open with a mystery? It's great to open with a question. It's great to open with a cold open story, like I was walking down the street when I had this crazy realization about my shoe, or whatever it is. Do you think tarragon actually improves your heart health? I don't know what sphere this is, but These like terrible examples, but something in that space, you know, like I would look at the starts of your videos, and then I would also look at how do you title and thumbnail them so that they are both accurate and clear. I had this argument with a friend of mine who, you know, I posted a video and I called it the simplest math problem no one can solve. And my friend was like, well, that's too clickbaity. He said, you should have called it the Collatz conjecture. And I said, look, the problem is the goal of the title and thumbnail should give you a sense of the promise of the video. What will you get out of the video? And if I call it the Collatz conjecture, the only people who know what the video is about are people who already know what the Collatz conjecture is and therefore don't need to watch the video. And the people who don't know what it's about are just going to see some jumble of words and they're not going to click it. So I'm losing on both fronts. By calling it the simplest math problem no one can solve, I give a sense of the flavor of this problem, which anyone can read and understand, and then, you know, click and get into it. I was looking at his thumbnails, and he had one video called Diesel and Urea. And I said, man, what is that video about? And he said, it's about the VW scandal. When they were using different chemicals mixed in, right, to cheat the regulations and, you know, get past this like diesel certification or something. I'm like, why don't you call it the Volkswagen diesel scandal or something? Do you know what I mean? Like, that is a better title. Not only is it more clickable, it also gives people a better sense of what that video really is about. So that's always what I'm about, is trying to give people from the outside, what is the promise of this video? What will I get from this video? And sometimes just saying the specific words, strange applications of the Magnus effect. There's another video title I went live with, ridiculous, right? Back in my stupid early days, right? Doesn't give people a sense of what's really in there. A backspin basketball flies off a dam, okay? Which is what it's titled now. So that did much better, obviously. But anyway, I have taken years and years and years to develop this sense of what's a better and worse title. So it does take time, but YouTube is much better now at giving you feedback quite rapidly when you make those changes, looking for what happens to the immediate view curves and the views over a few days to a few weeks and months.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Derek?
thank you so much. Super helpful.
We're gonna end here, but you can still catch Derek right after. Thank you very much. This was great.